Good evening. My name is Mansoor Kazaruni with Page & Steel IBI Group Architects. I am co-chair of ULI's program committee along with Mark Kindrachuk. Welcome to our annual ULI Fireside Chat event. And thank you for attending this event tonight. Before we begin, I would like to thank our sponsors, our lead sponsor tonight, Ellis Dawn, and our event sponsors tonight, our Architects Alliance and CBRE Limited. Thank you very much for your support. A brief background on the Fireside Chat event, one of my personal favorite events that the ULI puts up every year. Usually a conversation with accomplished individuals, in this case, the Menkes family, of course, from the development industry, and just a little window into their journey. In the past, we've had Ned Goodman with Michael Cooper, John Love with Blake Hutchison, Eddie Sunshine, and Freddie Wax, and a few others. Last year, of course, some of you may have been here for Mayor McCallion's talk with Jennifer Keesmaat. This is the sixth such event, and if you missed the previous ones, they are available on our website. Quick background on the ULI. ULI is a not-for-profit education and research institute with a focus on use of land in order to enhance the environment, and with a mission to provide leadership in the responsible use of land and creating sustainable, thriving communities worldwide. Building Healthy Places is a new ULI initiative that will leverage the power of the Institute's global networks to shape projects and places in ways that improve the health of people and communities. And we actually, in planning this event, we talked about this and right at the outset acknowledged that this is something the Menkes family have been engaged in for decades and have been at the forefront of developing such sustainable, thriving, healthy communities. Tonight's agenda will begin with a discussion with Mr. Godfrey and the Menkes family, Alan, Stephen, and Peter. That will go for about an hour until 7 p.m., after which we will have about 20 minutes of audience questions and then a quick wrap-up. We encourage you to submit questions for the Q&A through Twitter or by email to toronto@uli.org. Twitter info #ULI_FSC or #ULIask. The moderator for tonight's event is Mr. Paul Godfrey, who requires very little introduction. And I was handed a bio for Mr. Godfrey's background and his accomplishments, which spans about 12 pages. And I could make an event out of just introducing Mr. Godfrey. But suffice it to say that his career encompasses long stints in the publishing business, in professional sports management, and in politics. He is currently the president and CEO of Postmedia Network, Canada's largest publisher of paid English language daily newspapers. In keeping with the tradition of our Fireside Chat events, we really wanted somebody that knew the Menkes family well and could engage them in a conversation rather than a professional interview. We think Mr. Godfrey is that person. He has a very long association with the Menkes family that spans 5 decades and a long-standing family relationship that goes back to Mr. Murray Menkes. We are delighted to have him with us as moderator this evening and look forward to an engaging conversation. I will now invite Mr. Godfrey to introduce the Menkes brothers. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here tonight to share the platform with Alan, Stephen, and Peter. I almost didn't make it. You know what the weather is like. I decided that parking is too difficult downtown, so I decided I was going to take a cab. But I couldn't get a cab. So I decided to drive, and I parked maybe 5 or 6 blocks, and I keep looking at my time. I'm a fairly quick walker, so I parked the car a number of blocks away, and I started walking at a very brisk pace. I came to a traffic signal, and there was this little elderly lady standing there, and the light was red, and she kept looking up at me, and I nodded to her, and the light changed, and I bolted across the street. Much to my surprise, this 85-year-old lady was walking step by step with me. It was kind of incredible. I thought she was training for the Olympics for a while. I finally walked a block or so, came to the next light, and the light was red again, and obeying the traffic signal, I stopped, and she said, "Sir, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Certainly." She said, "Did anyone ever tell you you look like Paul Godfrey?" I said, "Yeah, that happens all the time." And she looked up at me and said, "Boy, that must piss you off." So I hope the reception tonight here is a little bit better than the one I received there. In any event, Menkes development. There wouldn't be a Menkes development if there wasn't a Murray Menkes. It was right, I knew Murray Menkes just after I got elected in 1964 for the North York Council. He was a small builder. I met him. I asked him how long he'd been in the business. He had said about 10 years. He was a small house builder back in the early 50s, building a couple of lots at Shepherd and Bathurst Street, this growing community up in North York. And business, through a recession, even at those days, was pretty good. He expanded to 6 homes the next year, 20 homes the year after, and then he started to build rental apartment buildings. And of course, along came big bad government and brought in rent controls. However, condos were introduced, and the Menkes empire, which wasn't a real empire at that time, started to grow and grow and grow. And for those of you that didn't have the pleasure of meeting Murray Menkes, let me tell you something. He was a risk taker. He was a visionary. He hated to see his name in the paper, but he was a very opinionated guy. Speaking to him one-on-one or in small groups, he would tell you what he thought was wrong with government. He would tell you what was wrong with the way things were going on and who he differed with and who he agreed with. But he was a strong-willed, principled man. And I watched over the years when I became chairman of Metropolitan Toronto, here was a guy that had the right vision. He met with Mel Lastman, and together, I can tell you, together, they changed the face of North York's Yonge Street. Some people called it Uptown Downtown. Some people called it the North York Civic Center. He also worked in Mississauga with Mayor Hazel McCallion, one of your previous guests for the evening. And it was wonderful watching a man who was very close to his family, very close to his community, do something that a lot of people envied but couldn't do themselves. So the face of North York changed, and yes, there were troubled times in the early 90s, and many developers who took risks, who built this great city, fell by the wayside. These young men, right here, started to get involved in the business, and I have some questions for them. And lo and behold, this company grew. And today, a lot of people talk about the Menkeses as being a giant company. Unfortunately, Murray passed away about a year ago. And you know, I often think that when you see a person's monument, usually states the date of their birth and the unfortunate date of their passing. And there's a little dash in between. The dash that Murray Menkes has is his history is a very long one and a very successful one. He laid the groundwork for an organization that no doubt these young men here tonight blossomed to things that much bigger, and as I said to them yesterday when I spoke to them collectively on the phone, that I don't think Murray himself would have ever believed that something this positive and this good could have happened. So that's a bit about the story of Murray Menkes, and I'm about to ask the boys, and I watched them grow up, and I watched them get involved in the company itself, and I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of families put their sons in charge of businesses after they've made a fortune, and I've watched the business disappear. These young men have taken the business and brought it to a new level, a level that we all can be proud of as Torontonians, and a level that others are going to find difficult to match. So thank you. I want to thank you for the opportunity of coming tonight to speak about Murray Menkes, who is a guy that I miss very much. We shared a home together in Florida. We're in the same building together in Florida. And more importantly, I now live in the building that he built for 4 seasons. So very close for many reasons with the Menkes family. I'm going to take my seat and we'll start the discussion with the three of them. Okay, gentlemen, you're all in major positions in this company. It's a multi-generational business, and it's a multi-use facilities all over the place. But I think the people here would like to know, what was your first job, and when did you start? Alan, we'll go oldest to youngest.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, that was a very nice introduction about our dad. You know, he was one of those guys that always had a very low profile, as you described, and he never got swept up in success. And he kept a very, very low profile, kept his whole attitude and outlook quite humbling. So we had that personification of him, and we grew up with that type of outlook. And when I first started working in the company, I had worked for about a year outside of the company in the investment business, and was lucky enough to get moved to New York and saw a little bit of New York City and the debacle when New York was going down, and when they actually declared bankrupt, on the verge of declaring Chapter 11. So then came back to, and then decided to come back to Toronto because my dad called me up and said, we just bought this tremendous property on Bathurst Street, just north of Finch. And it was a great opportunity to build high-rise apartments. And he said, you know what, I think we're thinking about building condos. I said, you know what, that sounds like a good business. I'd be interested. And he said, well, you don't have to. He says, you can come or you can stay in New York, and New York's a great place to live. And I said, you know what? I said, this is a great opportunity. And he offered it to me. So basically, it was a development of 1,500 units on Bathurst north of Finch, an area called Forest Hills. We built 6 buildings of condominiums, and we really it was the beginning of the whole lifestyle condominium movement, where we built amenities that were shared amongst all the different buildings. It had never really been done before. Up until then, condominium was really based upon rental apartments being converted to home ownership. There was really no concept of a lifestyle program. So that was really the genesis of really our condo business, which was in 1976. And that really sort of began from 76 through to 83, where we built out those 5 buildings.
So what year did you come back to Toronto?
76.
That was in 76, in the Forest, it was the old Forest Hills Golf Course, as I
Correct,
remember.
that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Stephen, when did you join the business, and what responsibility did you take on when you first started?
Well, I was always the sort of the numbers guy in the family, And when I graduated university, I spent a couple of years in the accounting industry. And then in 1982, I decided to join the company. And I guess one of the reasons, a few things at play. I remember always going to my dad's office on weekends or odd times, and before 1982. And I remember he always used to say to me that he was always a little bit frustrated with accounting in the sense of getting reports, getting timely reports, and the reports just seemed to be, they weren't timely or they weren't accurate. Those were in the days, of course, when everything was done manually. A computer was, $10,000, and maybe there was one in someone's office. So I really thought it was was my calling to start with the company in that area, which is what I did. And I spent my first 12 years in the company really focused on the financial end of raising capital for projects such as Forest Hills and many others.
What about you, Peter?
So I went to school in Boston, and it was 1982, and I came back, and it was a recession. Not a depression, just a regular old-fashioned real estate recession. And I was going to work at one of the banks, and my father said, I'll pay you what the banks will pay you. He just built about 5 industrial buildings in Mississauga, and it was a recession. They were all empty. So it was a great way for me to learn how to, deal with the recession period, and then really have the opportunity to learn from the people in the company and how to lease these buildings. And so I came in within the leasing department, which then by 1984 turned into buying land and building buildings. So that was the genesis of my foray into the company.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question now because I've watched fathers and sons in businesses. I've watched Ted Rogers work with his son in the business. I've watched Izzy Asper work with his son in the business. I've worked with my own son in the Blue Jays. And I realize that some days it's not the easiest to work with your old man. I would like to hear from all three of you how it was to work with Murray Menkes.
Well, we can go this way now.
Sure, we're going this way now. Alan's thinking. He's
Yeah,
making
yeah.
notes over here.
No, I know the answer.
No, he was a great mentor. Like Alan said earlier, he didn't really go for the spotlight. He was a guy that could express things to you very clearly and succinctly and not a lot of words. So he was a great mentor, but he had high expectations. It was hard driving, and he never treated us with kid gloves. We had to go out there and prove ourselves and work hard, and he would definitely be a tough guy, fair, tough, but very high expectations, but also extremely supportive. You could call, and whenever we would have a conversation, you could start the sentence, he would be able to finish it. There was such a symbiotic synergy that we all had with him, and he was just a tremendous mentor.
Stephen, you controlled all the finances of the company, so how did it work for you working with your dad?
We had a lot of discussions about that over the years. I can assure you that. All went very well. As Peter says, our dad always said that you never learn anything when you're talking. So he was a wonderful listener. And he would, at the end of the day, he would take in all the information that you were presenting to him. He would basically digest it, think about it, and usually come back with an answer that was spot on. He was very intuitive that way. And he was also incredibly supportive, as Peter was saying. He's the kind of guy that if you went to him with an idea, he was always try to back you. If you didn't agree with it, he would tell you. But for the lion's share of things, he was always very much behind us and things that we did, and was really a wonderful mentor for all of us.
Alan is the oldest one. Did you carry a heavier burden because you were the first son to work with them, and was it difficult?
Well, he was pretty strategic in the way that he quietly strategic, and I think that because he had 3 sons, not really knowing whether all 3 sons were ever going to enter the business, when they did, he sort of used it to his fullest. And I think what I would mean by that, in a good way, is that he suggested. We had 2 divisions. We had a high-rise residential division, which we'll talk about, and a commercial division, and of course, low-rise residential division. So his real tactic was to ensure that each one of us had our own unit, and we had our own independence. But within that own independence, you also had competitive juices. Everybody wants to be able to be successful in whatever their endeavor is. So the sum of the parts was much greater than the individual units on their own. And that's really what we thrived on, each other. And his joy, obviously, was to see them all operating, you know, in a very cohesive and in a very, very fluid way.
Well, obviously that took place. But Stephen, how does three brothers doing different things in the company, the interaction? Certainly, I know I have three sons. They don't always agree on everything. In fact, they quite often argue about things. How does when you're as a family you're united, but in business, tell me how it works.
Well, I think while we were in our formative years and our dad was busy working at the office, and I think our mother did a fabulous job of instilling wonderful values in the three of us and the importance of family. And that really started very, very young, and really has just continued seamlessly under the corporate side. We were lucky in the sense that the three of us, it's hard to believe, but that each one of us have been working in the company between 32 and 37 years. So between that, we have gone through cycles, up cycles, down cycles. We've all experienced the same vintages of what the industry has gone through. We've all learned the same lessons. And everybody has their strengths, and we all know what our strengths are. And as Alan says, by putting all those together, it really makes for a great relationship. We have the way that we have designed our divisions. We head up, each one of ourselves heads up our divisions, but by the same token, we're very, very interactive with one another on all major decisions. And on day-to-day operations, we're very independent. But at the high level, we meet every day, and we always know what's going on in each other's divisions. And it's been
that's great. That's great.
We think alike, we're like-minded.
Well, that's wonderful to hear that. Alan, I guess most people who have been around as long as I have, when they think back of the history of Menkes development, think of North York. And I think that the first giant leap from small company to at least intermediate or starting to take the shape of a large company came with the risks and the challenges of the North York City Center, the building of a downtown uptown. You want to tell us about that?
Well, I guess it was 1979. Well, I don't know. Where were you in 1979?
I was a chairman of Metro in 73.
So there we go.
73 to 84.
So right in the middle of it all, Mel decides that he'd like to build a downtown North York. So we were in that condominium business that we had started in '76, and we were also in the industrial business as well. And we decided that downtown North York was really a viable option because of the strategic location of the 401, of the subway. If you were to draw a map of the GTA and you put a dot in the middle, you would see that it would have been, at that time, would have been Yonge and Sheppard. So we realized that Mel was onto something, and it was actually quite viable. So we decided to take a position on a very, very strategic piece of land on Yonge Street because it was potential for an office tower. It was our first office tower. We had never done it before, and we thought if there's one place to do it, it would be on Yonge Street, connected to the subway. So we took a position. We bought the property and got it zoned and approved with Mel, who was very supportive, and he was supportive of us, of course, because this was going to be a landmark building as you came up Yonge Street into his new downtown. You were going to see this trophy-looking building at the time, and we thought that it would be very important. So we went forward and we got it all approved and ready to go in 1982, and of course the recession of '82 came. And for some of you who maybe haven't been through any recessions before, a lot of you have, but some of you haven't. When you go through a recession and nobody calls for a year, it leaves an impact, a lasting impact, and that's what happened. So we sat with this property for a year and a half and nobody called. We had it all approved, ready to go, best site in town. We felt that it was really the best thing. So we were lucky. We had a very, very strong banker who was behind us, and he said, you guys, it's a great location. I believe in you. You can start this building without any tenants. We'll support you. So that's what we did. Within 60 days of starting the building, a company knocked on our door and said, we'd like to lease the entire building. That doesn't happen too often, to say the least.
For sure.
And we knew it. So we made a marriage with Procter & Gamble. They leased the entire building for their headquarters. They moved from Hamilton. They consolidated a couple locations from Hamilton and St. Clair and Yonge. They moved all their people up to Yonge and Shepherd because of course it was on the subway line, and they were used to that type of environment. And they were forward-looking enough to realize that this was going to be a new area that was really going to make a lot of sense. So that's what happened, and they're still a tenant today in the same building, and we occupy our offices there now as well after being out of the building for about 20 years. Not out of the building. We didn't actually occupy the building until about 8 years ago. I'm trying to remember, Peter. Peter would know exactly.
Yeah,
10 years ago.
10 years.
We moved into the building. So we didn't occupy right at the beginning. Procter & Gamble occupied it and occupied almost all of the building. And then afterwards, with some of the changes, there was some space that came available. So that was a very big move.
Well, there's no doubt that that building was the catalyst that triggered the possibility of other things on the North York Strip north of Highway 401. Sure. Peter, you probably can enlighten the audience tonight about the Empress Walk, because that's a signature property there and one that was talked about for a long time, and people were betting that that would never get off the ground, and somehow you guys pulled it off. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure thing. So after the success of the Procter & Gamble building, which I might add, when their lease expires, they'll have been there for 37 years, so that's quite a run with the tenancy. So with that success and Mel's vision with the Miracle on Yonge Street, we went up to Yonge and Empress, which was really what Mel was calling the North York City Center, which today has a subway station there, and the site is right on that location. So when we went up the street, I think it was 1986, started to assemble approximately over 30 properties, about 8 acres of land for a major mixed-use project, which is what we're here to talk about, just the evolution of mixed use. So it was really the first go of a major mixed-use project that we had done, and probably one of the largest ones for Toronto, and definitely a landmark for North York. And Mel Lastman was encouraging us to take it to that next level. So we had it zoned for 2 office buildings, about 1,000,001 square feet of office, a hotel, which we had a letter of intent with Westin Hotels. We had a condo tower, and it all sat on a big retail podium. So we went through this assembly, we went through the rezoning, and 1990 hit, which 1990 was, the greatest real estate depression, and hopefully we don't ever see something like that again, because it lasted through till 1996. So we had all that done, and there were no tenants, and everybody knew that there were no office tenants, and no one knew when the next round of office tenants would come out. So we said, we believe there's signs of life for residential. It's a great community. There's already a good base of office buildings within the city center, so let's take the office density, rezone it to residential, and do a significant lifestyle retail entertainment center that would be the foundation and the base of this project, and build the condos on top with all the amenities for those residents. So with that, we got the support of the city, a little kicking and screaming, but they capitulated. And we went out to the market with a 4-level entertainment center. We went to the US, got some ideas on what they were doing there. Then we went to Loblaws and showed them the site. They understood the density of the people living there and working there, and agreed to put a concourse-level food store in the facility, which had a large atrium in the middle, but was connected to the new subway station that was going on. So we got Loblaws. We then went to something that was happening at that time. It was about 1997 or 96 at that time. In the US, they were doing all these multiplex theaters. AMC, Famous Players, Cineplex were doing the stadium seating. So we went to all of them. We ended up doing a deal with Famous Players to put a 10-plex in the facility. So we had the top floor and the bottom floor committed. And with that, those were our anchors. And then, hence the symbiotic relationships within our company. Alan, running the high-rise residential, was then able to go to the market to market condominiums with all the amenities of the lifestyle, entertainment, the subway, and all the attributes to make the condos a success. So really, that really laid the foundation to us, really believing in the lifestyle, entertainment, and mixed-use, facilities.
So basically, that project really cemented the idea of multi-use complexes, and which you've carried on very successfully as an organization ever since.
Exactly. And it was something that took us from 86 till 99. So it took us 13, 14 years
To really
from
realize.
start to finish, to go from a good market to a depression to a recovering market.
Well, very good. I guess a lot of people here may not realize what a company like yours has to go through during a major recession. You called it the worst you've ever seen. I think many people would agree with you. Stephen, as a finance guy involved in something like that, how did you face the challenges? What was it like, dealing with banks and dealing with the whole people that are involved in it, the trades and everything else, during a period of time like that?
Well, I would say the most important issue in that time, it's as Peter says, it was 7 years long. Effectively, the residential market stopped in March of 1989. The economy was slowing down. It was really a very substantial overbuilding, both oversupply, both in the office market as well as in the residential market, both high-rise and low-rise. There was revaluations going on. Lenders were under intense pressure because of their balance sheets, and the researchers on the stock market that were, of course, tracking their stocks and what their exposures were. So inevitably, when that pressure comes to bear on those lenders, one of the first places they go to look to is their customer base. It's very, very important. I can't stress enough the importance of relationships, communication, and honesty with lenders. As Alan said, we had a very good lender that supported us on the P&G building when we started on spec. And quite frankly, it was a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of long phone calls and meetings, but we had the attention and we had the support of a multitude of lenders. And in those days, there were quite a few lenders. There were Schedule B banks were around, so there was a fair bit of capital around, which is part of the problem why the overbuilding started in the first place. But by the same token, because of the history and successes that we had over the years prior to that depression, it really stood us in good stead with our ability to deal with lenders, and we had very good support. Part of the other things that we did to get through that, come out of the recession on the other end in a positive way, was to look for opportunities. So what we did in 1994 is we decided to resurrect our low-rise residential division, which we really had changed in the late 70s. When we went into the condos, we shut down the low-rise res, and we decided to go back into it. And at that time, it's very different today, but at that time, the low-rise residential market was 75% of the new home market. Today, it's a much lower percentage. So we decided to go into that, and we built just recently completing in our last phase of operations, really a mixed-use community in the town of Ajax, of about an 80-acre piece of land that we bought, that we had, and we built 600 houses along with a food-anchored retail shopping center of about 130,000 square feet. So we built this community. The shopping center is complete. It's fully occupied and serves as a great amenity to the community that we built immediately right beside it. And the low-rise residential division has continued for the past 20 years, since we put it back in shape in '94, because we saw that was where an opportunity was. The recession really ended around '96. We went into it in '94, and we came out of it, and it was the right call to make, because there was a lot of activity in that sector when that depression finally ended.
Peter, you were telling me before how you developed a relationship with the pension funds at that point in time, which I think for all the years that I served in public life, pension funds really didn't show their face. Nobody heard the pension funds, but all of a sudden, pension funds are now very involved, and I guess that you got started in the early '90s with them as well.
Right. The pension so by the mid-90s, the banks were really out of real estate. They didn't want to touch real estate, and as we know, real estate's a very capital-intensive business. And at the time, actually, companies that I'm sure a lot of you remember, companies like Cadillac Fairview and Oxford were companies that got in, that had severe problems, and teachers was invested with Cadillac, and OMERS with Oxford, and today those are now 100% owned by those pension funds. But they were public companies that ended up getting taken over that way because they couldn't, because the amount of capital they had required to, run all those office buildings. From our standpoint, we wanted to grow our industrial base, so we wanted to build industrial buildings, we wanted to build office buildings, And at that time, pension funds looked at real estate as a good alternative asset class. So they were anxious to get into the business. So with their capital and our capital, with predominantly our expertise in being a developer, hands-on developer, knowing the market, we created several marriages with a few pension funds, and to this day we still own buildings with those pension funds. We're developing 25 York Hotelis building and all the projects we're doing downtown with pension funds. So that's really the way of the world today, because it's just so capital intensive. So it's a way that we transgressed, from the 90s into the going forward in the future, and by becoming a much bigger business and company, as you mentioned earlier, we need that kind of capital, so it's a natural source for us. So it's been a great relationship.
The Menkes development seems to have gone from one iconic building to the next, and each one seems to be more of a challenge and a bigger challenge. Alan, how did you land the Four Seasons? The Four Seasons, the corner of Avenue Road in Yorkville, seemed like they were going to be there forever. Obviously, you convinced Izzy Sharp that you had a piece of land, that you could create something bigger, nicer, better, and now a new iconic building in Toronto. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, that was a challenge. Actually, I'm not sure that my dad was really that much in favor of it in the beginning, because he knew the challenges of building a complicated building like it. He knew too much. So, but we had just come off Empress Walk, and we're developing the TELUS Tower at 25 York, and we were talking to Four Seasons about their existing building at Avenue Road in Yorkville, and really in trying to renovate it, but it really wasn't doable. The building was built in 1970 with low ceilings, really a fortress-type building at the time, and it really didn't serve their purpose. They had 450 hotel rooms, and they really only needed 250. So I think 5 or 6 floors were never really occupied when they were running the hotel, because they never really needed them. And they didn't operate that type of operation. Their operation was based upon a luxury hotel operator of medium-sized hotels. That was their formula, and that's really what they wanted to stick to. So Toronto was really one of the last cities really to get a new hotel in the Four Seasons chain. But they never wanted to leave Yorkville. They were dead set on staying in the area, and so we worked at trying to find the suitable site, and it eventually did come up where the new Four Seasons Hotel and Residences are today. And it was a complicated design, because we had to build condominium residences to be able to subsidize the cost of the hotel. Because to build a hotel on its own, a 5-star hotel with their types of services and their level of finishes, really couldn't sustain the market value, couldn't sustain the cost of that type of building. So we realized that residential was really the only formula that could, number one, help subsidize the hotel, and number two, it actually was an amenity that the residential buyer would like to have. So it was really it was a mutual type of value proposition. So basically, we went ahead and we zoned and got the site approved by the city. And interesting story, when we went to when we applied for the zoning at the city, we dealt quite extensively with the local communities, as you normally do. And when we came in with a 55-story building, we came in with a 50-story building, and we had 2 towers, a 50-story building and a 30-story building, 28-story building. They said, I got it wrong. They had a 50-story building and a 35-story building. They said, why don't you take the shorter building and take 5 floors off the shorter building and put them on the taller building? Never heard of that before. I never heard of a ratepayer group coming to you and saying, make the building taller. But they did. And we said, okay. It ended up that was they actually were right, and we were too conservative, and they had the right outlook, because at the end of the day, we found that people wanted to be above the hotel with tremendous views of the city. The higher, the better. And that's what people responded to when they bought, as you well know. You have a
I'm sure
you
I
have
do
a
know
great
that.
apartment. I've been in it before, and you got a spectacular view.
No, there's
You
no
got one of a kind.
No, and what Alan is saying is it's a breathtaking view. I overlook the whole city, and I thought I purchased something on the 42nd floor, and when you moved it from 50 floors to 55 floors, I suddenly was on the 47th floor. So you put the 5 floors in, and I was quite surprised. That was a bonus as far as I was concerned. And I can tell you from being on other floors, as you go down, the view becomes more spectacular as you go up.
Exactly.
There's no doubt. And the boy's mom lives on 54, and her view is spectacular, spectacular. Yeah. Now, it's interesting. The Four Seasons managed to, in my opinion at least, become the go-to building. The Ritz-Carlton did the same thing. They had a hotel and residence. The Shangri-La did the same thing. And Trump, who had all types of difficulties and still have some even today, how did you avoid them when they seem to have difficulty?
Well, I can give you a little bit of color. Really, there's a couple of real major differences. Number one, there was a hometown brand. People had an affinity. Shangri-La, Ritz, Trump had never operated in Toronto. Four Seasons had, so they had a following. The location of Yorkville was really one where the market was really waiting for something that was really in that vicinity, and that was always a Tony neighborhood that people wanted to live in with that type of product, but couldn't find it. And the third thing was the hotel lifestyle, which really hadn't really been exploited in Toronto in any big way, but had been in the U.S. And a lot of the Four Seasons buyers are what we call Four Seasons aficionados. So they'll travel the world and they'll stay in a Four Seasons hotel in Europe or in Asia or in the U.S. and they totally get the brand. So we didn't have to convince them of the brand. I mean, they walked in, they said, well, this is a Four Seasons. Where do I sign? So they were already committed. So we had to do a little bit more than that, but we did build the type of product that they were looking for, the residential product they were looking for. But clearly they bought for the services, for the investment value, and for the future, knowing full well that this was going to really withstand the test of time, and that management of Four Seasons would continue to manage the building. So they had the feeling of longevity that it would stand up.
Now, my spies in Florida tell me that a sign has just gone up in recent weeks that the Four Seasons residents are going to be built in Surfside, right on the ocean. Is Menkes going to be building that? Let us in on the secret.
We'll be walking by, but we won't be building it.
One is enough.
One's enough.
One's enough.
All right. Well, while that's going on, Menkes strikes again. There's all types of development going east of Yonge Street and west of Yonge Street. Very few people, other than the buildings that were built on the railway lands, were going south of Yonge. Yet you decide to take the challenge and build something right next to the Air Canada Centre for a major tenant, a major player who's a big advertiser with us, so we're very pleased with that. But tell us about that.
So the South Core Financial District, as it's known today, back in 2005, starting really in 2000 when the Air Canada Centre opened in 1990 with the Skydome or the Rogers Centre, really that was just derelict railway lands. So once the Air Canada Centre opened up, we were still recovering from the recession, and we obviously hadn't seen the office buildings being built. I think a lot of people thought the downtown core would shift to the west, to the entertainment district, but there still hadn't been any demand. By 2005, when we bought the site at 25 York Street with Telus, the vacancy rate was about 3 or 4% in downtown. So we went ahead, we bought the site. There were a lot of pundits who said, nobody's going to go south of the tracks. And from our standpoint, we would stand in any office tower downtown, look south, and see Union Station, and you'd see a site that wasn't across the street, but it was part of Union Station. It was actually, we have a connection right into Union Station, so it was right there. It's the busiest transportation facility in Canada. So we took the plunge, along with a couple of our financial partners, pension funds, one that still is our partner in the deal today, that we went and bought the site, designed a spec building, and at that time when we closed in December of '05, by March of '06, we had a signed lease with TELUS, who was taking 60% of the building, about 460,000 square feet of an 800,000 square foot building. So they saw the value in A, Union Station, having that connectivity, B, having a tremendous workforce of young people, educated people in a great location, and C, sustainability. They really have a culture of sustainability, and we were one of the first to do a LEED Gold building. So all those features together, we believed in it. And my friend John O'Toole there, when we at a conference, he said that we poked the bear. We woke up the downtown market, and all of a sudden, other developers who realized their buildings were full and didn't want to lose their tenants went and bought other sites in the area, and the whole area has just blown wide open, and everyone has been very successful with all the office and condos that have gone ahead there.
Well, we talked a little earlier on that how building the Procter & Gamble building on Yonge Street was a catalyst for making things happen. It seems to me you've done the same thing in the core of the city. The North York boys went south, and basically you built 25 York Street, and now you're building next to the Harbor 60 Steakhouse, providing them a lot more customers for the future that they really don't need.
Right.
I'll tell you that. Can't get in there anyway.
Right.
But what are you doing there? What's planned for the future in that complex?
So now we've taken all our, this is to us the icing on the cake of all our mixed use expertise, and we have a tremendous team in the office of everybody that's been with us for a long time and understands the challenges, because what we have on the site, which is from Lakeshore to Harbor Street, from York Street right next to Harbor 60, and it's a 2.5-acre site that we bought, and we had it rezoned for 2 million square feet. It has 1 million square feet of residential and 1 million square feet of commercial. Of that commercial, 800,000 feet is office and 200,000 feet is retail. And then on the residential side, it's 66-story tower and a 69-story tower, 1 million square feet. So it is a mega project, very complicated. Sometimes we look at each other and say, why do we do this to ourselves? We could just build 3 towers and get on with life. But we really see a lot of demand for that area. As everyone knows in this room, it's really center ice in the city now. It's where all the activity is, where people want to be. It's got a great vibe to it. So with that, we've embarked on that program. We're under construction there. We've basically leased 60% of the commercial space and sold a lot of condominiums. 80, a lot of condominiums. So much so that we're under construction on the entire project right now, and we'll be moving our first tenants in summer of '16 and the condo residences in 2017 sometime. So really exciting, and that's really the culmination of the expertise. And I think it's an edge that we have when we go to the marketplace, and not many companies can really have all that depth within the organization from a development standpoint. It's not for the faint of heart. It's very stressful, difficult to build, to design, and try to please everybody. You have office tenants, you have retailers, you have condo residents who all want to have their own identity, and you try to put that into one project. It's very challenging.
And what about all the traffic in the area?
Union Station. No, actually, the traffic in the area now is really a function of all the improvements. Front Street is closed. Union Station is going under a major, renovation. One amazing thing I think for the area is the ramps on York Street that come off the Gardner are going to be removed. Main entrance is going to be off of Lower Simcoe. So York Street will now be a gateway. So our building will be the signature building as you have the gateway, and all our buildings that also have connectivity to the path. So path is going to go from the Air Canada Centre with a bridge underneath the Gardner into our building, bridge over Harbor Street into the new RBC headquarters, and then take you right to Queens Quay. So all the residents who live in Queens Quay have a path system now, or will when the buildings are completed. So we've really connected, the waterfront to the core.
Which shows you the great things that Toronto has been doing, and you guys are playing a major part. But I want to talk to you, before we finish, about the future. father takes his 3 sons into the building. What about the 3 sons and the next generation? You know what, generation 1, generation 2, what about generation 3, Stephen?
Well, I think that unbeknownst to us, as the 3 of us have been working for as long as we have, and as hard as we have, we've really set subliminally a very good example for our children. And they've watched the 3 of us get along so well with our father in the business for so many years that they have a number of them, 4 of them so far, have decided to join the company. And some as long as go as 5 years, or a little over 5 years, some as recently as a month. And those 4 people are going through a process where they're being trained and mentored by a series of executives in our company that have been with us for many, many years. And they are working in separate divisions, similar to the logic as the 3 of us. They're spread out as well, and being trained and mentored in specific areas that they're interested in. And it was really a wonderful thing to see for our dad as well, because up until last April, he was still coming in the office when he was in Toronto, and he had a great relationship with those 4 as well, mentoring them. And they really relished that relationship that they had in a company sense. They always knew him, of course, as a grandfather, as at home or on weekends, but to see him in action in the office, and for our father to be able to hand down all those years of experiences and knowledge to them was really a wonderful thing to see. So we're very much excited and structured in trying to ensure that their success in the company, and so far we're very pleased with it.
Well, that's great. You all operate separate divisions. It's almost like 3 separate companies, and somehow you've linked them all together, and it appears seamless throughout. I'd like to hear from each of you. What do you think is the greatest challenge for the future? Alan?
Well, that's a good question. Challenge, opportunity. You know, we all talk about infrastructure in the city. I've been talking about it for 10 years. And the biggest challenge to get the infrastructure installed, which should have been installed many, many years ago, is really a collaboration of 2 levels of government: the province and the municipal government. And I think that there really has to be a collaboration that really should both, and it's really a political collaboration. And there has to be a way that those two groups get together and really execute on the strategy that has been talked about for so long. And maybe it's egos, maybe it's someone really believing that one system is better than the other. And I do take them all for what they say, which is they do believe that, you know, a subway might be better than a LRT or whatever the Eglinton line is going to be called. I'm not sure what LRT is the right word or not, but the point being is that there needs to be a cohesive program that's set and moved forward with quickly, because everyone talks about it, and as we all see and we all know, gridlock is just continuing to get more and more of an issue, and will continue to. And people want to be able to move around. They want to live the vitality of living in a city. It's dynamic, and people want to live with other people, and that's what the city is all about. And government has to be able to come together to be able to facilitate that, because that's what the social makeup and the social direction is of this next generation.
And you're expecting this city council to? Never mind. I'm sorry. I'm getting carried away. Sorry about that. What's the greatest challenge in your area?
Well, certainly the low-rise residential market is a third of what it was 10 years ago. We now do about 12,000 houses a year of new sales, whereas 10 years ago it would have been 30,000. And the reason for that, of course, is the places to grow legislation in the Greenbelt that's been enacted of 2 million acres around the city that has really significantly cut back the availability of land supply for low-rise. And as a consequence, the price of low-rise housing has gone up significantly, as we all know. So that, to me, is by far the biggest challenge for the low-rise industry.
Peter?
Well, I was, I had challenges and opportunities, and obviously, I was thinking about opportunities which we've really intensified our company within the city from a mixed-use standpoint or standalone between condos or office, and really see that as where the future is, because I think the intensification is fantastic. But that said, the transit situation is really bad, and that was what Alan touched on, put it eloquently on that, and it's a real issue that is 30 years behind. It's going to take a long time to figure out, but I think the city is still a wonderful place to be, and I think that's where the opportunities are. And if I think you're always going to find challenges in the business, be it financial and supply of land, and there's a whole restructuring, I think, of if I go to the industrial business, how it's changed over the years, and today it's strictly a logistical business. The buildings we're doing today from the industrial are totally different buildings than we did 25, 30 years ago, and a lot of it is factored around the retail business, so you could link how the effect of these logistical buildings that we're doing for companies like Amazon. We're not, but I'd like to. But in any event, they're doing. I've seen the facilities they're building, and it's unbelievable, and it has a direct impact on the retail business, where retailers are now going to be getting smaller and adjusting. And I think that's more of from a challenge standpoint. Not that we do a lot of retail. We've got about 1 million+ square feet that we've been worked on, but I see that as a challenge from the retailers I talk to, that they all want to downsize, and it's because of the logistical capabilities that they have within these facilities that why they're downsizing.
We're going to have a question period for a few minutes after this session here. I have one last question for all of you, and we'll wrap this portion up and find out what the audience you'll be in the bear pit then. What one piece of advice in 30 seconds or less would you give to a young person that you followed in business that was your path to success? We're all different people. We all have different ideas how to get there. But Alan, you started off.
Besides having a good banker?
Well, maybe
A
that's
strong
all that's
banker?
needed.
The one thing I think that I've sort of learned over the years is that excel in an area that you really feel comfortable in. Let everybody know that you are an expert in that area. People will come to you. People luck will go your way. People will call you. Opportunities will arise. If you let people know that you really want to be known for that particular area, it'll stand you in good stead, and it will differentiate you when you're out marketing your own personal brand.
I would say that obviously everybody wants to be successful in business. When the market is strong and the economy is performing well, it's relatively easier to be successful. It's when the market goes south and the market things get tough, that's when it becomes very difficult. And it's all about mitigating risk. And as part of that, the one thing you can control, you can't control much of the economy. What you can control is your name, your credibility, and your relationships in the world. If in the business community, if you've got a credible name, then when you go to ask someone for hard questions, then they will support you because they know that they can trust you and you're good for your word and you'll perform.
Well, we probably should have scripted our answers when I go third, but I think about when I started in a recession, I went out there and I met lots of people, and creating relationships that I have to this day, and people that when I was in my 20s now are CEOs of big companies that we partner with, and people that I grew up with in the business. And that, to me, is a very fulfilling milestone, that you can be around the table with someone who knows you, has grown in the business with you, and respects you and knows your integrity and all those things. So really having strong relationships, if it's with brokers, bankers, tenants, and to create those relationships, because they'll stand you in good stead through your career as you evolve and you mature.
I spoke to a group of young people last night, and they asked one question of how you achieve certain things in life. The only advice that I could gives him. I said, you know, I asked him a question, which comes first, confidence or success? And the word is confidence has to come first, because if you're confident about doing something, success will surely follow you. And I could see the expression on many of their faces last night that they had never thought about it, because a lot of them went with great hesitation. And when you go with great hesitation into a situation, you look unsure of yourself, and people don't have confidence in you if you don't have confidence in yourself. So anyway, gentlemen, thank you. We've got a number of questions. I was just starting to look at them. I will just read them out, and any you can volunteer who wants to answer them. How difficult was the retail and residential integration on your 1 York Street project?
Well, I have to arm twist my brother Alan to have cores, well, actually, I should say, actually, yes, arm twist me. We have, when we do the retail, we have these cores of these towers crashing through the retail, so we have retail tenants that say, I can't have that there. And then we have to move it, and I have to go down to say, we have to adjust your suite layout.
Oh, I'd like to sit in on those meetings.
So it's very challenging, and that goes to my point. Sometimes we say, would it just be easier to put up 3 towers and not get complicated? So it is very complicated, every moving part, and we've got a bunch of our construction guys who are smiling back there, because every time someone moves a wall 3 inches, the ripple effect can be quite devastating and expensive. So it's very challenging.
But that was a competitive advantage of ours, where we were able to secure that property because we were in office, retail, and residential. A lot of other developers don't participate in all 3 areas. And because we were able to do that, we were really the ones that were able to secure the property against some other very, very strong competition.
In downtown Toronto, which side of Yonge Street does Menkes see the best opportunity to develop large-scale projects? Both sides?
Wherever the sites are big
right
enough.
down the middle. I think that, I think that both areas are great. I mean, we all know that the city is continuing to intensify, and if you look at, major projects that have been developed over the last 25 years in the city, you'll see that they're always along a transit corridor, whether it's public or whether it's a good road network. So in the city, transit is so important, and you follow the transit lines, and that's where people will go.
This is a very interesting question. Can Menkes continue to grow in the GTA, or do you go somewhere else? If we're talking about let's talk about the
Surf zone?
Let's talk about the downtown area. Based upon, Alan, you basically talked about the cooperation between the provincial government and the city government. I can tell you that's the same question they were asking 30 years ago. When are they going to start cooperating? Maybe 30 years from now, we can see. I got to tell you, if I was running in the next provincial election, which I'm not, I would run on the question of solving gridlock, because I think gridlock is the problem. Without a solution to the gridlock problem, can we put more density in the downtown core?
Well, people aren't using cars.
Oh?
Believe it or not, the condos that Alan sells, you don't. The amount of parking that people require has been limiting. Is much less.
I would agree with you that people are not using cars in some instances. But when I drove down Bay Street to try to get on the Gardner to take my wife to the airport the other day, I saw a lot of cars.
Right.
There's more in 905.
General Motors is still making them.
Right.
But people will start, using public transit in a better way. At least you have a link to the airport.
And there is a generational shift of transportation as well going on. There's never been more bicycles on the road today than ever. I see people riding bikes, in the dead of winter. That's quite remarkable. And in the summertime, it's a whole different story with that much more. So the generation below ours has much more varied as to the way that they get around. And I think that's part of the reason why the amount of parking spaces being provided in condos being built today downtown is much, much lower than it would have been 5 years ago.
There's no doubt about that.
It's the mix. It's the mix of office and residential. We have lots of office in downtown Toronto, but we didn't have much residential. So today, people want to be able to walk to work or take one subway stop away because they don't want to own a car. And that's really the future. The future is to be able to have a very, very good balance of all those uses together that are in close proximity.
Here's a question. I don't know the answer to this, maybe you. What was it about Georgetown that inspired Menkes to develop the enclaves of Upper Canada?
Well,
I don't even know where the enclaves of Upper
that's-
Canada was.
that's very good. I'm proud of that question.
Is there a buyer out there?
Probably whoever asked the question probably doesn't realize that that's actually our 4th site in Georgetown. We've been building there for about the past 15 years, and it happens to be a very, very picturesque part of the province. And it's a real, very, very tight-knit community that has a very low supply of homes. So we've been there for a long time and hope to be there on future sites as well.
It's the last question that I have here, unless somebody from the audience, and I think maybe we should take the last couple of questions, surprise questions from the audience. Mayor Ford, do you have a question back? No, I'm waiting.
Very good.
Here we go. Here's the question.
What effect do you see e-commerce having on retail and brick and mortar for 2014?
Well, it's a
Good question.
great question, and I see.
Question was, what impact do you see e-commerce having on retail going forward?
Well, we're seeing retailers requiring less square footage because they don't need to. The stores don't need to be as big. They can be more like a showroom. I think that I'm not sure if the number is 10% or whatever the e-commerce side is. I think that the projections over the next, not only 14 but in the future are ramping up significantly. So I think that's part of the challenge. I think in the retail space, not that retailers are going to disappear, but I think the size of retail stores are going to continue to get smaller because of e-commerce.
If my 85-year-old mother is buying online, then things are changing.
And she's buying more, too.
She's addicted.
Questions?
Who owns the Empress Walk brand? You own it or RioCan owns it? The Empress Walk brand, I live in that property. I have a penthouse there. So I'm just wondering whether Menkes owns the brand or RioCan owns the brand.
Should we call Eddie up?
That might have been
Well,
it's a good question.
The Empress Walk was a name.
Yes, I know.
And we built the retail and the residential above. After we had completed the retail, we had sold it because we weren't at the time really didn't feel that we wanted to be heavily in that retail space at that particular point in time. And RioCan came to us and said, we'd like to buy it because that's our business. They twisted our arm and we sold it to them. So we built the condominiums and we built the retail as a combined mixed-use project. So today, as you know, the residential is owned by all the condominium owners, and the retail is operated and owned by RioCan.
Did RioCan get the brand from you or just the space?
Space.
So who owns the brand?
There is no brand because the name Empress Walk is a name that is not a name that you could copyright.
That's the correct answer.
Right.
I think you're right.
It's
I
a
think
trade
that's
name.
right. Any further questions?
Do you guys have a vision of the city of Toronto a generation out from now? Something that doesn't exist today, but 25 years from now will?
Good question.
Mayor Ford will be 88 and will still be in office.
Who wants to take that one? Where will be 25 years? How the city will look 25 years from now?
Different.
Hopefully lots of public transit will have been built. I think there's actually been photographs of with all the density that's been approved and where buildings can be built. It shows the skyline of the city of Toronto, that which is quite dense, and I think you're going to see a continuation of that density expanding both east and west of Yonge Street all the way along the lakefront.
And I would add to that that immigration continues. Between 80 and 100,000 people come to the city. That's what's driving all these new units that are being built. So on the assumption that immigration continues, we have a terminology some people use, the Manhattanization of Toronto. I think you're going to see more and more density downtown, and more buildings, more tall buildings. And I think that, quite frankly, that phenomenon of population migrating back to downtown is really occurring in every major city in the U.S. So it's not specific just to Toronto. So I think you'll continue to see more of the same, as long as the immigration continues.
Yes, sir.
The provincial forecasts are that the Greater Toronto and Hamilton areas will be about 9 million people by 2031. And 2/3 of that population is going to be in 905, and 1/3 in the city of Toronto as we know it today. And 2/3 of that employment is going to be in 905. Building on his question, do you have a vision for 905?
Ask Hazel.
Well, I think that with the greenbelt that I was speaking about earlier, it has slowed down the amount of land coming on stream. And in addition to that, the various regulatory authorities that control the development of land have also become more and more intertwined with the process. So the development process today takes about twice as long as what it would have taken maybe even as recently as 10 years ago. I think that notwithstanding that greenbelt, there is a lot of land yet to be developed south of the greenbelt, which is known as the White Belt. It's outside of urban areas, but I think that the supply of lots and land is there, but the regulatory process and the entitlement process is very, very slow. So I do think that over time, all that land White Belt land will be developed. And to the north of the Greenbelt as well, along Highway 400, areas of Bond Head, Highway 88, those areas are all coming on stream as well. So the low-rise development is actually hopscotching over some of that Greenbelt as well, which was not the intention, obviously. It was to contain it. So there maybe have to be some adjustments to ensure that there's a ready supply of land to try to moderate pricing in the 905 area.
Well, one more question, and then we're going to adjourn. Sir?
As we see in the areas to the northwest and Vaughan growing, just we only going up there east and Markham to Buttonville Airport, which area do you see would be the next North York?
Well, I guess, I think that you're asking what regional node would really be the next one that would really sort of take off. Vaughan has really tried to promote their downtown in a significant way, really because of the transit. The Spadina line is being extended up to Vaughan, and they're creating a similar type of experience that North York did 30 years ago with the population base that they have now. And the retail base that they have. The whole key to answering part of the question that the previous person had asked about the 905 is regional nodes are very, very important to be able to take off some of the strain of the system. No one wants to travel from Ajax to Brampton. Some people do, but that's really not what's really desirable. What's desirable is to live in an area and either work in that particular area that doesn't take you too long to transfer to. So more regional nodes. Vaughan is probably the one that's furthest ahead. Mississauga, of course, has already been developed. And North York. Scarborough tried to, and they've had their challenges. And to the west, I guess after Mississauga, would probably be Milton one day. But I think Milton is probably a little bit further off, but they're more of a traditional community that's really feeding on, that Mississauga feeds on as their bedroom community, so to speak.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank Alan, Stephen, and Peter for being very frank in their answers. I think that we're very fortunate as a community to have them take over what their fathers started and have taken it to the next level. They've produced some buildings that I truly believe, and many other people truly believe, that are iconic. And I think it's a great credit to the three of you that can operate in separate responsibilities and in the same company, cooperate in such a way as to make the multi-use buildings, your retail and your residential, and you keep the financial records straight between them and keep them apart. I noticed we even kept them apart tonight, and so it's worked very well. I think that we all owe the three of you a big debt of gratitude for the great performance you've done. You made this city proud. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Projects like Empress Walk, Four Seasons, and Harbor Plaza that we just heard about are exactly the kind of thriving, sustainable urban communities along transit corridors that the ULI believes will make Toronto a better and more livable city for all of us. On behalf of the Urban Land Institute, I would like to thank you all, Peter, Stephen, Alan, and Paul, for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank all of you for attending this event. Our lead sponsors, Ellis Don, and our event sponsors, Architects Alliance and CBRE, for helping us make tonight a success. A few just quick notes on upcoming programs and events. We have an Urban Ideas competition that's now open, and members from the development community are invited to submit their visionary ideas or proposals to reconnect the City of Toronto with its waterfront. And our registration deadline's extended to March 14th, and there are more details online. There will be an awards event that will follow on April 23rd, announcing the winners, and we will be exhibiting the winners' proposals in public spaces in downtown Toronto. We encourage anyone here that's interested to participate. March 12th at 5 p.m. we have a ULI student career event. The space is limited to 80 and registration is filling up quickly, so sign up now. It's a great event for students who would like to learn from other young professionals in the industry. In March, we launch our mentorship program, and if you're interested in becoming a mentor, please see Alex, our district council coordinator, who's back there. May 21st from 5:30 to 7:30, we will be hosting a program on developing mixed use and multi-use communities in Toronto's priority neighborhoods, Regent Park, Lawrence Heights, and Alexandra Park. And there will be details posted on that in coming weeks. And there's other exciting events coming up, a bike tour of project developments and members-only tours. All of those will follow. Thank you all very much, and look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Nice seeing you, Peter.
My pleasure. Really appreciate it.